Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Smoke-Filled Room. We definitely were not up until 3 a.m. last night watching the budget and are definitely well-rested and able to form coherent sentences. Brad, how tired are you?
I am in the Jackson Brown song, running on empty. And
I also want to say Brad has yelled at every person in his office pretty mercilessly within the last hour.
Yes, I don't mean it though.
I know, but at a certain point, it's just a mass onslaught where even if you don't mean it anymore, it's just exhausting.
Well, hopefully I don't yell at you on this, and if I do, well, we'll just do it live.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Anyway, so yeah, I was at the house till very late, and they went till, 2:30 in the morning?
No, it was 3.
3 in the morning to pass the budgets.
It was 3:15, 3:30.
I was planning on, if it was even if we were out at a regular time, I was planning on running to a local watering hole and having a drink to decompress, but it was so late that everything was closed.
As one does, particularly if your name is Bradley Johnson.
Yeah, and you had already left, so you weren't going to join me, but you wouldn't join me anyway because reasons. But you want to make an announcement on the podcast right now, or other than you being a fuddy-duddy,
right?
Of course.
For sure. Yeah, no. I'm pregnant, and I'm 6 months pregnant. I've been pregnant for a long time.
Gosh, you've been hiding that forever.
And Brad really wanted to announce it on the podcast.
Because this is about me, okay?
He's been talking about this for how many days? 3 days?
Oh, yeah. I've been planning this.
But I feel like that was pretty anticlimactic how you, Brad wanted to rehearse this, and yeah, the delivery.
I'll just chalk it up to me being tired. But, we do have, me, your husband, and our friend Micah do have a plan to, when the child is born.
Yes.
To, take her to the bar and just hang out and, just, I don't know.
I'm sure there's no angle for you there whatsoever.
No, definitely not. No, got no angle there.
No angle at all. Just a bunch of boys hanging out with a baby at a bar.
Yeah. If there are things that come from that. You're the only
single one? Yeah.
Yeah, if there are things that come from that, then that's just gravy, right? And we know I love gravy.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for announcing.
So congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Cat's out of the bag.
We figured we should announce at some point so I'm not just gone one day.
Yeah.
That's really
I didn't
what
do
it came
this
down to.
on my own. I didn't just wing it.
Well,
I did have your permission.
You had my permission, but you
and I
did
would not
do
have
it
done
on your
that.
own.
I would not have done that without your blessing.
No, but that's where, okay, let's talk about this. On the weekly roundup a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about our March Madness bracket titles, the names of our March Madness brackets, and mine had to do with my pregnancy for my secondary bracket, and Brad almost completely outed that and basically set it up so that I could announce it if I wanted to, and I just looked at him like, you crazy person.
Accurate. I did almost slip up, but I caught myself.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, there you go.
How much worse has it been having a boss or coworker who's pregnant while on the job?
I don't know. You haven't inconvenienced me yet, but you will when you go on maternity leave. So I'm banking all the brownie points, and the bill will come due, just so you know.
Yeah, no, I'm fully aware, yes. I think my schedule among the office has been the most high maintenance in the last year and will only continue to be.
You are a very high maintenance person. If there's one thing I know about you, it's that.
It's very true. It's very true. Well, we always say this, but we have a lot to talk about.
We do.
Quick rundown of what we're going to chat through today. We have, obviously, Paxton and Cornyn. That's a huge... That seems also that happened 2 weeks ago, and that happened, 3 days ago?
Yep.
Really wild. And then budget night. Last night, obviously, the House went very late talking about the state budget, so we have more than we expected to talk about on that front. I think a lot of folks expected it to be a little bit less dynamic and fun than it was. I, for one, was really hoping that it was as fun as it was, and then once it got to 3 a.m., I was like, okay, maybe I hoped a little too close to the sun. But it was still great. And then we'll talk about the Harrison and Burroughs of it all and how this week went.
You love that phrase. That is your favorite phrase.
Of it all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it
You gotta
wraps.
bank some more sayings in there.
Okay.
Come on now.
You and all the hate emails I get tell me the exact same things. So maybe I really should listen to them.
It's almost like I'm onto something.
It's all occasionally. Well, should we start with Paxton?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
The thing that ruined my Tuesday night. Thanks.
I love how
Attorney
we
General Ken
truly
Paxton.
do make the coverage of the news about us.
I'm kidding.
Me
I mean,
saying I really want budget night to go late. Like I was opining on Twitter about how
Yeah.
back in my day, budget night used to be something that
Back in
went
my day.
actually through the night. People were. I think it resonated with a lot of folks who've been around the building for a long time. But at the same time, once it beggars can't be choosers, and it was hilarious
Yeah.
that of course then I went to 3 a.m., which was the latest it's gone for a long time, which I loved. But
Well, it's funny you say back in my day because we just had an experience with
Facetiously,
Jaden.
by the way.
Right. But we are at that age now where we can actually say that with some ground to stand on because I made a reference earlier that we'll play later in this episode that Jaden, who's now editing our podcast, did not know, and it was a very famous internet meme from the mid-2000s, and I just could not believe that someone did not know the reference.
well, I didn't either.
Okay, but you don't count.
Okay. I'll also say Brad is really.
You're an uncultured swine.
That's true.
Yeah.
Brad has also put a lot of effort into producing this particular podcast, from the pregnancy announcement, which again he took it upon himself to grace the world with that information, as well as having multiple clips he wants edited in this podcast that he will find ways to siphon in. And by him, I mean Jaden, who has to edit all of this
Yeah. But hey, it's
on
going
a
to be
Friday
good production.
to be ready for Monday.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Part of the gig.
Okay, well, let's talk Paxton. So Tuesday
Yes.
night, as we said, it ruined your Tuesday night. Next time, we'll make sure that statewide officials consult you before they make big announcements.
Yeah.
But this was the Attorney General going on Fox. We've heard from him for so long regarding his interest and intent, really, to run for this Senate seat against Senator John Cornyn, and he announced on Fox. How do you do it?
He announced on Fox.
Yeah, I know. Guys, we're gonna really try our best to be
Yeah.
coherent.
So he tweeted out.
I knew you were gonna do that.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like we know each
I
other after
teed
6
you up.
years.
I teed you up.
You did. And by the way, the 6-year
It's today.
reunion of the Texan is
Reunion?
whatever it is. I don't know.
Anniversary?
I'm tired. Anniversary of the Texan is coming up later this month. So
I think it's
the 29th.
oh.
Yeah,
Yes.
for the
yes,
launch,
correct,
yeah.
correct. Oh, it's just an alert for us to prepare today.
Yes,
It's
yes.
the 29th. I know that by heart.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Anyway, so
Really, we're trying to get to Paxton.
Yeah, so he
We're trying,
he
people.
tweeted out, "I'm going to have a big announcement on Laura Ingram's show." Everybody knew what that was.
Yeah.
Right.
Although he done it a couple of times, and we're like, here it comes, and then it
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah.
And of course, we talked about this on the weekly pod a while ago. He kind of prefaced this, foreshadowed it with an interview with Punchbowl News saying, if I can get $20 million of commitments by June-ish, I will jump in and I'll run against John Cornyn. Well, he popped off a little sooner than we thought, and he jumped in the race telling it was very brief. It was a very brief segment. He comes on. Ingram first asked him about I think it was a border policy from the Trump administration, some legal situation. And then she goes, "Oh, I hear you have an announcement." And he goes, "Yes, I'm here to announce I'm running for U.S. Senate against John Cornyn." He gives his line about Cornyn not being a good senator who stands by Donald Trump enough, that kind of thing. So Paxton immediately jumped into, of course, right, the messaging. This is how he's going to make his pitch to voters about him being the right option for this Senate seat. It was brief, and then his campaign put out a statement going in more in depth on the general theme of Cornyn is anti-Trump and that Paxton is pro-Trump. And
Would it be fair to say that the messaging for either candidate had already been pretty much
yeah.
figured out?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Very much
Definitely.
so, even in the lead up to this announcement.
Yeah. So, but immediately it subsumed all of politics, like even national, because everyone had been expecting this. This is going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Republican primary race in the country, I would say. And yeah, I mean, right off the bat, haymakers were being thrown. both of them were rhetorically elbowing each other, and I think it's going to be that way the entire time.
That's like one of your favorite words, is rhetorically.
Well, because they're not actually physically elbowing each other.
Mm-hmm. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're critiquing each other.
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. I did it to you first.
Okay, thanks.
So there's that. Cornyn's team came out with a statement. They sent it to me.
This was a heck of a statement.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The first paragraph was basically a pitch of how Cornyn is pro-Trump and is Trump's guy in D.C. and has stood by him and helped negotiate the tax cuts in 2017, that kind of thing. But then then the spokesman just laid into Ken Paxton saying, the first line of that second paragraph was, Ken Paxton is a fraud. And then mentioned the Hidalgo, the OAG withdrawing their lawsuit against the staffers of Lena Hidalgo for, what was it, like corruption, various things.
A COVID-19 contract
Yeah.
that had been essentially, allegedly, very much handed off to somebody, even though the contract was scored far
Yeah.
poorer for this Democratic strategist who is well connected to the
Yeah.
staffers. And
Now, I can tell
which
you.
Holly Hansen is great reporting.
Right.
Go check it out.
Right. Now, I can tell you that there's a lot of disagreement about that at the time. It still is, between the legal guys, the lawyers, and the political side. And it is going to be a problem politically for him during this race.
Huge.
And I saw it. I don't recall exactly what he said, but I saw he was trying to. He did address it, and he was, giving his spin on it, right? And so he'll have to continue doing that, because this is one of the big things that Cornyn's going to hit him on. This is out of the gate the first thing he mentions as a hit on Paxton. This is going to be a theme. It's not just going to be a theme. It's going to be a feature.
Yeah.
So.
And also interesting because though there have been pieces written about this, folks have talked about it, it certainly is a huge deal in Harris County. Lena Hidalgo is certainly someone that Republicans across Texas criticize heavily and have a disdain for. So it's not like it's some far-fetched punch at the Attorney General, but it has not been, again, we're not in campaign season necessarily, it's not been utilized. We've not seen this screamed from the rooftops like this yet.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see how how it actually does move the needle.
The Cornyn team was clearly keeping their powder dry until he actually jumped in. For example, I asked them for comment when Paxton gave the interview to Punch Bowl, and they said, "We'll wait till he gets in, if he gets in."
Yep.
And boy, did they!
They were ready.
So now they're off. These two, we've talked about this before. Of course, there's no love lost between these two. They do not like each other. Back when the impeachment was going on against Paxton, Cornyn tweeted something like, "Hard to run from prison, Ken." This has been brewing for a while, and the writing was on the wall for a while, for a long time. Although there's some interesting backroom fights going on over this and whether Paxton should run or not, and clearly he was not convinced not to run. He's in the game, and now we'll see how it shakes out. But there's a long way to go between now and then. And in reply to the statement, Paxton said, I'm not going to respond. We only respond to attacks by campaigns who aren't down 25 points.
Whew.
And then in the campaign memo or campaign statement, they talked about a memo and linked to it, the polling memo of saying Paxton's up 25 points on Cornyn. So keep in mind, it is an internal poll.
Meaning
for
it's
Paxton.
coming from Paxton's
Right.
camp.
And it's one that they're putting out themselves. I'm not saying it's wrong. Like, we've seen some other polls that have shown a pretty big gap between them. I don't think it's 25 points, though,
Right.
at least right now. No ads have been run.
But notable regardless, the incumbent senator is certainly quite vulnerable,
Right.
according to polls we're seeing at
absolutely.
this point, right?
Yeah. And we've talked, I think we mentioned this before on a previous one. When you look at up until this point, there hasn't been much head-to-head. So you have to judge based on faves. And the intensity of Paxton's support among Republicans is very high. But the negatives are also high, higher than Cornyn's. And so the question is, which ceiling is higher here in order to get the votes?
And how this messaging works.
Right.
Like, this is going to be a very interesting, because again, we're talking Republican primary voters for this challenge. This is going to be an entirely different bucket of folks that come out for this than they do in November. But it's going to be very interesting to see how that works. And that certainly plays, I think, in Paxton's favor. But regardless, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of money spent in this. It's probably going to be the most expensive Republican primary.
Did you mention the
country.
mistress line?
Oh, I did not.
Yeah,
No.
that's
So,
that necessary.
Yeah. So after the Hidalgo thing, they went on to mention the stated basically Paxton uses.
Here, I'm going to read it.
Yeah, go for it.
Let me pull it up here. Because I think that's what it was, like a 1-2 punch, right?
Yeah.
So mention the
I think there
Hidalgo
were
of
three
it all.
things, but this was
and
the
then,
third, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm just going to read this This is the paragraph
Yeah.
that really got folks talking, and you'll see why. Ken Paxton is a fraud. He talks tough on crime and then lets crooked, progressive Lena Hidalgo off the hook. He says his impeachment trial was a sham, but he didn't contest the facts in legal filings, which will cost the state millions. He says he's anti-woke, but he funnels millions of taxpayer dollars to lawyers who celebrate DEI. That was the second prong.
Yeah.
And then third, and Ken claims to be a man of faith, but uses fake Uber accounts to meet his girlfriend and deceive his family. So, big throwback to the impeachment of it all.
And from a campaign side, you do not come out swinging like that unless you feel threatened as an incumbent. Look at what Greg Abbott did in 22. He ignored Don Huffines and Alan West, acted like they weren't even in the race, and that was the right decision because they had no.
It's
Ultimately,
an entirely different ballgame, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a formidable challenge, the likes of which Cornyn has not been through ever, I think. I don't think he's been in a primary this contentious.
Yeah.
He's won primaries before and won them by a lot. Most of them were against non-entity candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And to your point, right, that's something you usually don't do as the incumbent. I kind of interrupted you there, but that's if you are being challenged by someone and you're like, okay, this is not necessarily the threat. I think we need to go negative on this person or even mention my opponent. That is typically the road taken by incumbents of saying, I'm not even going to mention my positive messaging. And if polls start to get closer, if it becomes more contentious, if there's a lot of money thrown behind or the race gets closer, that's when you'll see the messaging change on behalf of the incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
It's already.
What was that?
My phone dropped. My point, we're already there.
Yeah.
I just wanted that for dramatic effect.
Well, it scared me.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, we were there, and we're going to be there the whole time. This is going to be the Cornyn statement said, we look forward to a spirited campaign. That is the understatement of the century. This is not just going to be a spirited campaign. It's going to be nasty, brutal. They're going to start biting each other. This is a backstreet brawl.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for it.
So it's going to be wild. And of course we knew it was coming, but there were so many different conversations we were hearing about, you were hearing about behind the scenes. So it was like, okay, when is this happening? Is it happening? But when it was announced, I think it was a little bit faster than we expected. And that Fox News hit quick, albeit, was still one where he was like, I'm going to go on like it was not some tweet. It was not some video that was released. It was a national media hit to say, hey, real fast, I'm on Fox News. Folks can see me on their screens. I'm running for U.S. Senate.
On the biggest platform for Republican primary voters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He didn't give the scoop to us.
Yeah. No kidding. No kidding.
So, also, let's talk about, I'll run through endorsements a bit. So, right after Paxton announced, he got a couple of notable endorsements. There was a lot from like the online right expected, right? They hate Cornyn and they have forever. But Congressman Troy Nehls and Lance Gooden have both endorsed Paxton in this. I think those are as far as elected officials go, those are the two biggest that we've seen so far. I'm sure more will come. Cornyn, meanwhile, has gotten the endorsement of the National Border Patrol Council, the union for the Border Patrol agents. Notable there, they also endorsed George P. Bush in the 2022 Attorney General race, right? Then also he's been backed. Cornyn's been backed by Tim Scott, who's running the Senate Republican Caucus fund. Also John Thune, Senate Majority Leader, and it's clear that the money is going to be on Cornyn's side, and it's going to have to be to make up the deficit here, right? Paxton, he can fundraise, but it's not like he's in the echelon of Greg Abbott or Dan Patrick. He's never been there. Or Cornyn. This is a whole different ballgame. And Cornyn is going to have a ton of money to spend and spent on his behalf. Also notable, a non-endorsement, Senator Ted Cruz is staying out of it. He's not going to back either candidate, he said in a statement. that he's friends with both of them, and he's going to let the voters decide.
Yeah.
So
his statement was literally verbatim that, essentially. Like, I'm friends with
Yeah.
John, I'm friends with Ken, first name thing, throwing that out there. And I think that's what we'll see from most Texas statewide Republican officials.
Yeah, and because this is a Republican primary, this is an internal fight. It is different than like Cornyn endorsing Cruz for a re-election last year, right? So, Cruz does not want to take a crap from a great height on whoever his next colleague is from the Senate, whether it's Cornyn again or Paxton, right? So he's going to stay out of it. I'm sure Cornyn is disappointed by that, but expected it, right? We kind of knew this was where
You'd probably say the same for Paxton in a lot of ways, even though it is more understandable, maybe from a 30,000-foot perspective, that he would not endorse against his literal other half in representing Texas in the Senate.
Yep, absolutely. So the other big thing is Trump. Where does Trump go? That is going to have a lot to do with who wins this primary, and he's not endorsed yet. I read this morning in Politico, they reported that the reason Ken Paxton jumped in as early as he did was to preempt John Thune's push for Trump to endorse Cornyn. And Cornyn's been making the appeals a lot. Their goal was to try and keep Paxton out of the race by getting the Trump endorsement early. Didn't happen. Ken Paxton's in. So they were trying to preempt that. I think they were also trying to preempt Wesley Hunt getting in the race. And it remains to be seen if he's going to jump in. But the talk about that has been ramping up a lot lately. Hunt has been running ads throughout the state, or at least the PAC supporting
not just
him.
in his district.
Yes. So there's that. Hunt also is close with Trump. He probably thinks he has a shot at getting the Trump endorsement. Otherwise, he wouldn't really be looking at this, I don't think. But regardless, he might jump in, and that will be another factor to watch.
How do you think that complicates things? What's the
If he
breakdown
jumps
there
in?
of overlap between Paxton and Hunt and Cornyn? But I
Yeah.
think that's the sector of the party they would attempt to be vying for.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, Hunt has some crossover appeal on both sides.
For
I think he
sure.
could pull votes from both,
Yeah,
or he could just not get any votes whatsoever.
but in a primary,
Yeah.
where you're going to be heading.
Right. And if he jumps, I think the biggest effect for Hunt is if he jumps in, that makes the likelihood of a runoff a lot higher.
Yeah.
And a runoff in Texas is not kind to incumbents. So from Cornyn's perspective, he probably wants Wesley Hunt to stay out, or anybody else of any significance to stay out.
But make no mistake, this is not, if Wesley Hunt were to enter the race, it would not be some coordinated effort on Paxton and Hunt's part to say, hey, let's really get the senator into a runoff.
Well, I think you can make the argument that Paxton would like to see Hunt get in because that would make it more likely that Cornyn is pushed to a runoff, right?
Maybe.
But that's not necessarily the same thing as
I mean,
it being
yes, on
coordinated,
paper,
right?
but I don't think this is,
But they're considering that, right?
For
Like,
sure.
If they're back channeling, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Wesley, you should jump in. That'll help both of us take out Cornyn, and whoever wins that wins it. That stuff definitely happens. The consultants are talking to each other, which brings me to, actually, I should mention the consultant side of this.
Yeah.
And I wrote this in fourth reading this week. You can read more about it there. It's pretty interesting because Paxton has Axiom Strategies. That's Jeff Rowe's firm. And one of the largest Republican consulting firms in the country. They're massive. And they have a large and growing footprint in Texas.
And certainly already have Senator Ted Cruz
Yeah.
as one of their...
Yeah. And I think I wrote this in a newsletter way back last year. It's an interesting example of strange bedfellows because Paxton and Axiom, I believe, were on the opposite sides of that really nasty Senate race between Angela Paxton and Philip Huffines.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so
I think you're right.
they've made up clearly, like Paxton has them. He's
Yeah.
been paying them. And this is not new. He's had them they were his consultant in the 22 AG race, right? And they've been consulting for him ever since. They were handling comms during impeachment for him. So this is not a new thing.
Right.
Even though some in the national media acted like it was new. Now, the thing that is interesting and new is that I think it was Axios reported that Jeff Rowe is telling people he's not involved in this. And the big reason that that is notable is because Jeff Rowe was he ran Ron DeSantis' super PAC last year, and for president, and so he pissed off a lot of people in the Trump world, and that has come back to bite them in some ways. You know, you have people in Trump world who hate them, who are advising everyone against doing business with Axiom because of that. How much of an effect is it having? I don't know. Axiom just went through layoffs. Axiom's spin on it is we were responding to kind of market changes.
Like everyone's hurting.
Everyone's hurting, not just that, but also like the way you conduct campaigns, especially with AI, is changing. So you need less workforce. I think there's something to that, but you can also.
There's 30 people.
Right. You can't divorce it, I don't think, entirely from.
Or reportedly 30 people.
Right. You can't divorce it entirely from that factor, right? Especially when you have one of the biggest names in Republican consultant politics right now, Chris LaCivita, just dancing on Jeff Rowe's grave constantly. I'm sure he is back-channeling all kinds of opposition to Rowe in all these business angles. But guess who John Cornyn has hired on his
Who,
team?
Brad?
Chris LaCivita.
Huh. Interesting.
You know who had Chris LaCivita in Texas in the 2022 cycle?
Who, Brad?
George P. Bush.
Oh my gosh.
Axiom and LaCivita are fighting it out again, with Paxton again in the mix, only this time it's John Cornyn that has hired LaCivita. So that statement that was put out by the Cornyn spokesman, that is a LaCivita ad, or messaging.
Yeah.
The severity of the criticism, right?
Right.
That is LaCivita through and through.
Going for the jugular.
He is going to empty the clip.
It's not like Ken Paxton's messaging has not also been very, very strong, but he's been messaging this whole time, and in preparation, in anticipation of entering the race. We've just been waiting, right? So him talking about Cornyn in these ways is not foreign to us. Like you said, Cornyn was the one who was like, I'm waiting until he gets in. So when that statement dropped, it hit hard because it was, just like you said, it went right for the jugular.
Yep. So that will also affect the Trump stuff. You know, there are those in Trump world pushing hard for Ken Paxton to get the Trump endorsement. There are those pushing against it very hard.
Do you think there's a world in which Trump stays out?
Honestly, I think it's pretty likely Trump stays out.
Yeah.
And I think you can tell that by Ken Paxton's statement to Mark Davis this week that he doesn't expect a Trump endorsement, really, for anybody in this. Now, my galaxy brain theory is, and this is dark horse, I'm not saying this is likely, but another name that has been bandied about for jumping in this.
What?
Bandied about.
Bandied about.
That is a term.
I never have ever heard it.
Well, I put it in multiple of my newsletters that you have read, and obviously.
Well, obviously I didn't pay enough attention. Yeah.
Classic Mac move. So the other name, and this is someone who has been also running ads outside of the district they represent, Ronnie Jackson. What does Ronnie Jackson have over everyone else in this discussion?
Are you talking about
Trump?
Are you talking about taking care of his literal health time and time again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody has a more personal relationship with Donald Trump in this group of people we're talking about than Ronnie Jackson.
Of course, Ronnie Jackson, current Texas congressman.
Yeah. Up in the Panhandle.
He was very involved, I know, in the cabinet pick process, vetting process, like somebody that the Trump camp very much takes seriously as part of their crew.
Yeah.
And was, of course, the doctor for the president.
Yes. And, you know, when Paxton jumped in, I spent basically, after we got the piece out, I spent the rest of the night on the phone with consultants because they all wanted to talk about this. One of them said to me, other than Dan Patrick, and maybe even more than Dan Patrick, Ronnie Jackson is the one that holds the most sway with Donald Trump.
Which goes under the radar because he's a congressman and not statewide elected official.
And you can bet he's looking at this. He's considering it. Does he do it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is very much something that he's thinking about.
And we've heard his name far less than somebody like Wesley Hunt. So
yeah, he's been less active. Wesley Hunt's been very active in running ads, right?
Yep.
Jackson has run ads, but he's been less active in that.
Yeah.
So.
Which also, I mean, when Cornyn, because Cornyn officially announced, hey, I'm going to run, right? That was last week? Or by the time this comes out, it will have been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks. And his first, I mean, this tells you the Trump of it all and how I think it is so apparent that Cornyn has been in every way possible sidling up to the Trump side of the party in ways like he's finding ways to do this, both that are very legitimate and saying, hey, I've actually worked with the president on a lot of these things and changing some of the messaging that we haven't been as familiar with from somebody like Cornyn. And his first ad, I helped President Trump with this. We partnered on this. President Trump, like that's the messaging.
Yeah.
So it'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah. By the way, Scotty Scheffler just teed off on the first hole for the second round of the Masters. He's, I think, in like third. So. How
bitter are you that the Masters is going on right now?
Yeah, I didn't get to watch almost any of it yesterday because of budget day.
Yeah.
But I will be spending the lion's share of this weekend watching the last 2 rounds. So.
Part of why Brad was yelling earlier when I said that he was yelling at different members of our team, intermittently. One particular instance was him yelling at Rob to get the Masters on. So Rob was just fumbling with the remote
and it
trying to
wasn't
get
Rob's
it on.
fault. It wasn't working.
No, it definitely wasn't. But did that prevent you from,
I did it in a joking manner. Okay. Rob was actually very happy with the way in which I spoke to him earlier.
I'm sure. Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, did we hit everything on that?
I do want to say that the statewide implications for elected officials on this race are far more interesting than folks. Because, I think it's very fair to say we don't expect Dan Patrick or maybe Governor Abbott to jump in and say anything about this race, right? Just like Senator Cruz is saying, I'm not jumping in. I'm not talking about this. I'll let the voters, what do you say? I trust the voters of Texas to make that decision. I think that's the case because it also goes under the radar sometimes how often or infrequently these guys talk, right? You have your statewide slates who are involved in state politics here, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the governor, and then you have your federal guys who are elected to to represent the state on the federal level, and certainly some talk more than others, but there's kind of two camps, right? The federal guys and the state guys. Mm-hmm. I remember at the convention last year, we were standing at our booth, and Senator Cornyn was walking through, which, certainly not a crowd that's particularly excited to see him on any given day. We've talked about the boos that he's withstood going up in front of a crowd at the Republican Party of Texas convention. But he was there walking around, checking out the booths, and the lieutenant governor came up, and I think he was about to interview at our booth. Mm-hmm. And they were talking in front of...
Which, by the way, I spent the entire interview looking up like this.
Yeah. Why, Brad?
Because I am not nearly as tall as he is.
Well, both of them are pretty tall guys.
Yeah.
But it was so interesting because obviously this was not too far removed from the impeachment effort, right? Hold on.
Was this last year's convention?
It was last year's convention.
Okay.
Yeah, it was right after the impeachment effort of the Attorney General, which again, and I think it's worth stating as well, which we haven't, that he was acquitted of all 16 charges or 16 articles, right? He certainly got out of that.
So, and that's going to be defense in all this,
absolutely.
Right?
There's nothing there's nothing to charge me there. But they were standing in front of the booth, and they started talking about Paxton.
Couldn't hear anything they were saying. Did you catch any of it?
I caught some of it, but I don't want to miss. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But essentially, it was just Senator Cornyn and Dan Patrick talking about this, and wild to watch. And of course, they were also, which I also thought was very interesting, that was the venue in which they decided to have this conversation because a crowd gathered. Mm-hmm. Folks were around, and we're standing there as members of the press, and Dan Patrick's about to join you for an interview, and we have hot mics 10 feet away. But they were talking about it, and certainly in hushed tones and very close together, trying to chat through it. But it appeared that was one of the first, if not the first, conversation that they had about that. And of course, Senator Cornyn's what the Attorney General has eyes on. Mm-hmm. It's me. And the Lieutenant Governor saying, well, hey, here's what happened in the trial.
Yeah.
Very interesting to watch that go down. But again, these relationships that these guys have don't often play out in any authentic way where we can watch it. We don't know how great their relationship is or not great their relationship is, how frequently they talk, how infrequently they talk. Mm-hmm. Which is very interesting to watch that go down, right in front of us. And of course, you have staff for both elected officials standing there like, oh gosh, this is the venue they're choosing to talk about this. But
talk about a soap opera playing out in slow motion right in front
oh,
of us.
we were like salivating. It was awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk the down ballot effects of this. So obviously that opens an AG slot. I'll just say quickly, there's a lot of speculation that Dan Patrick wouldn't run again, or at least there has been for a while, and it was heating up a while ago, and then it kind of dropped off, and then recently it was heating up again. Well, that's put to bed. He's running for re-election. Donald Trump endorsed him. He this morning on Friday put out his own statement saying, I'm running for re-election. So if he hasn't been clear enough yet, I think it's pretty clear now that he is running for re-election. Always put a stipulation on there. Things can change. But right now he's in, and I don't see any sign indicating otherwise. But that takes a potential vacancy off the table, right? And so we did that the draft episode way back a year ago now, right?
We referenced it more than any other episode.
Yeah. And the question was, what would happen when the dam breaks at the top of the ticket? Abbott's staying put, Patrick's staying put, but you have these two openings right now. And
big openings.
And so all these members who have, politicians, many of them legislative members who have been waiting their turn, they're antsy. They want to run for something. They've been angling for a while. And so now we have an opening in Attorney General, which historically is a really good springboard to higher office, especially the governor's office. Abbott was Attorney General.
I was going to say, we've seen that happen before.
Yeah, right. Cornyn was also Attorney General right before he became senator.
Which is easy to forget because he's been in the Senate now for so
that
long.
Was 25 years ago. So that opens. We have one candidate declared so far, John Bash, an attorney from Texas. He was a Trump-appointed district attorney in the first administration. He's also Elon Musk's lawyer. And from what I heard, he saved Musk $6 billion in some lawsuit. So the pockets are going to be pretty deep for this guy. I think Elon Musk's going to give him anything he wants, really. And also that'll give Musk a top ally in one of the most pivotal positions in the state, particularly at a point where Musk is ramping up his presence in Texas, not just business-wise, but politically, right? So nobody knew. I never heard of this guy. Nobody really knew who this guy was.
That's the thing.
But this is not a candidacy to just overlook.
Yep.
This guy is going to have backing.
He's got the pedigree.
Also, I don't know if I said that. Guess who his consultant is?
Who, Brad?
Axiom.
Interesting.
Yep.
I did not know that.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's an interesting play.
Well, that complicates.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Right. So
especially for people who are floated as potential candidates who are not currently.
And then, you have the question of, so Trump endorsement is the biggest endorsement in the state, in Republican politics, period, across every office. But in this case, there's an argument to be made that the second biggest one is Ken Paxton himself. What does he do? His consulting firm is running this guy's race.
Which means something and nothing.
Yes.
It's both.
There are two top allies of Paxton that are being talked about in relation to this opening. That is Mitch Little, newly elected representative from DFW area. He was, of course,
Denton specifically.
He was, of course, one of the impeachment attorneys for Paxton. That's where he made his debut. That's where he exploded on the scene, resulted in him being in office, and now we see it playing out. Him in the House, which has been interesting to follow. We'll talk about that in a bit more. So that name is talked about. He was on Mark Davis this morning and basically said, I'm thinking about it. The other one that I've heard is Aaron Reitz, ran for State House in 2020 for that Goodwin seat. I think he finished fourth out of five, Finished fourth out of five. It was
a very blue, or not very blue, but
at that point it was there
was a chance.
Yeah. Then it got redistricted and it made it safer for Goodwin, and she's not going to lose that seat. So he ran that, but then he joined Paxton's office as one of the top assistants. I think for legislative strategy, that was his lane. So he went there. Then he went to be Ted Cruz's chief of staff, and he was that for a year and a half, maybe 2 years or so, whatever it was. Actually, I think he left right before impeachment, and then
before
Paxton was impeached.
Oh, right. Yes.
Or maybe it
left
was
the Attorney
in the middle
General's
of it.
office.
Yes.
And then
went to Cruz's office as chief of staff.
I can't remember the timing of that.
Yeah.
Though.
He was there until late last year after Cruz won, when he got appointed to the Trump administration. He's an assistant attorney general in the Department of Justice.
When folks talk about Texans appointed to different positions in the Trump administration, obviously you think about a lot of the big positions, but
Brooke
certainly,
Rollins,
of course. But Aaron Wrights is up there, absolutely, in terms of the names that are talked about.
He is someone whose profile has been raised quite a bit.
Significantly.
Yes. So he is, his name is being talked about. He's considering it. I don't know if he's going to do it, but...
Now, everyone you've also mentioned, it's very interesting to note, have not been on a statewide ballot, right? So these are people who... Now, Mitch Little has won his race in his House district, so he's been on the ballot in his own area. But that is an entirely different ballgame, and he's a freshman, right? Yeah. So there's not a ton of time that he's had in front of voters.
Right.
And then John Bash, not somebody that the electorate is familiar with.
At all.
He's not
been elected to anything.
Like, his name came up when he announced, and I was like, who is this?
Yeah. And
now that may not be a problem, depending on how support coalesces behind him.
Yeah.
And if the tea leaves turn out to be correct, that could not be a problem.
Yeah.
But the same goes for Aaron Wrights.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all candidates who have quite the pedigree for this position, and certainly amazing connections, lots of support, but not folks that have the same familiarity among the electorate as potentially other people that you and I have talked about wanting to run for this position.
And in terms of their closeness with Paxton, I would think those two,
Little and Wrights,
personally would be more, have the inside track to getting the Paxton endorsement. Now, Paxton has said he's probably going to stay out of it. He's not going to get involved. So I think he said that to Mark Davis as well. So right there, it sounds like he's going to stay out, right? He's got his own race to run now too. That was kind of his point.
Yeah.
So Little, Wrights, Bash. I guess next I'll mention Matt Rinaldi is thinking about it. There's been a lot of push from especially the more activist right in the Republican Party for him to run.
Former state representative, former Texas GOP chairman.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
attorney.
Yep.
Obviously.
He told me that.
Although you don't have to be an attorney to be the attorney general.
No, you don't. No. He told me he's thinking about it.
A lot of these guys out there with their names, spinning around for this position would all be pulling from the same pool of support.
Right.
So it really just comes down to who can get it first.
Right. And then you throw in things like Little could not run from cover, meaning he would give up his House seat if he ran for this. Wrights can't. Wrights would have to give up his new appointment to the Trump administration. Bash basically has free run. Like he's not in anything, right? Rinaldi as well. He's not in anything. He wouldn't lose anything if he decides to run for this seat. Now, the two other very interesting ones that have been talked about, and these are names that have been mentioned constantly. Mays Middleton, state senator from
That was
down
one
in
of your
Galveston.
choices when we drafted.
I think I had him for governor. Yeah, I had him for governor.
Oh, did I have him for AG? Maybe I had him for AG.
Maybe you did.
Okay.
So that. Then Brian Hughes, who has long wanted this. His name has been talked
Both
about
state
for
senators.
AG for years,
Yes.
right? Middleton's he's newer on the scene, right? But he's a fast riser. He has deep pockets, personally deep pockets. So self-funding there would give him a leg up, or at least put him on equal footing with John Bash, who presumably, let's say, has all the Musk money, right? Then you add the fact that Middleton is a frequent and prolific donor to Donald Trump and has been in these, personal meetings with him, right? So
that's the size of the check that this guy can write.
That's an advantage to get the Trump endorsement. Middleton is a fast riser. He definitely has his sights on higher office. Question for him is, do I wait for, let's say, when Dan Patrick or Greg Abbott decide to call it quits and go for a position that I want more than AG? or do I go for AG and get statewide name recognition now, right? And I believe Middleton can run for cover on this. By running for cover, it means he's not on the ballot in 26. I think. Can you look that up for me while I talk?
Middleton? Not on the
Yeah,
ballot?
Middleton. I think he was elected last year, 4-year terms for the Senate. So he can keep his Senate seat if he decides to run for this in 26 and loses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another advantage.
Because that seat's up in 2026.
Oh, then I'm wrong. So he cannot. He would have to give up his seat. Can you look up Hughes as well while
Yep.
you're at it? So Middleton has a lot to look for in this position. And
2026?
okay, both of them, neither of them can run from cover. So Hughes has been wanting this for a while.
Can you explain the run for cover thing really quickly?
Yeah, so like if Middleton or Hughes had been elected last year for the 4-year term, they can run safely without having to lose their seat, give up their seat.
The reason why a House member couldn't is because they're up every 2 years.
Yes,
Where
so-
senators are 4, so you have a 50-50 shot of being
Right.
able to.
Right, absolutely. So there's that, and they are, they would have to give up something to do this. It's not a safe run. Hughes has been wanting this for a while. His name's been mentioned in relation to AG whenever the dam broke for years, and he clearly wants it. And I think in terms of just personal credentials, in terms of political presence in the state, he and Middleton, being state senators, probably have the highest floor just from that angle, right?
Which is
Before
what-
you include any of this other stuff.
When we were mentioning earlier, hey, these guys who've been floated don't necessarily have the electorate as familiar with them as other names that have been floated. These are the other names that we were talking
Yeah.
about who have a little bit more familiarity or a significant portion more familiarity with the electorate.
So there's that.
Still district seats,
Right.
but regardless.
Right. They have, 950,000 constituents, right? So it's a lot more just base level name recognition than a House member or someone who's never been on the ballot about anything.
And again, if we're talking about a Republican primary, we're talking about folks that Republican primary voters in the state, the most engaged portion, incredibly familiar with.
Yeah. So there's those two, and the reason I put them together, both of them are not going to run. It's not going to happen. One of them is going to decide to run, the other one's not. Oh, I didn't mention when I was talking about Middleton, he was considering running in 2022, and at the time he was a state rep, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. No.
No, he's a senator?
Yeah, he was a senator. Because he was
No, he won in 22, didn't he?
for Senate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So he decided to
To
run
run
for
for
Senate
Senate instead
of AG, while Matt Krause ran for AG.
That's right.
Yes.
Talk about pulling
Yes.
from the same pool. That was kind of the
Yes.
discussion.
'Cause
Yeah,
those
yeah.
are they're both allies in the House. They were in the Freedom Caucus. They decided they were deciding between themselves who was going to do it. Mays ends up in the Senate. Now, the reason those two are linked, they have the same consultant, Jordan Berry. At least right now, Maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't. Berry cannot. If they both jump in, Berry can't do both of them, right? He'll have to pick one. But they're simply not going to both jump in. So they're going to have discussions behind the scenes. Who are we going to run with here? Who has to sit and wait their turn? Middleton has the money, right? I don't know. I don't have any insight on that right now, but I know that they're going to have to figure that out. I've heard the name Eva Guzman tossed in. She, of course, ran in 22. She had the TLR backing then.
How big do you think this field gets? We're talking a lot of folks. A lot of these people are not going to enter to run.
I think if Middleton jumps in, he has at least the chance to clear more of the field than anyone else because of the money, because of the relation to Trump in that regard.
I think Bash announcing early gives him a really
Right.
far better chance than he would have if he
Yes.
would have waited, considering he has no name recognition.
The other side of this is none of these legislators can raise money until the session's over with. And then if we're in special sessions, which hopefully not, there are prohibitions then too, right? So all this stuff is being considered by these guys. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think we beat the AG thing to death, right?
We could talk about this for
Yeah.
forever.
I don't even know what minute we're on. How long have we been going?
Around 50 minutes.
Wow, it's gonna be a long one, but I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, we're gonna have to deal with cameras, so we're gonna have to speed it up a little
Okay,
bit. Yeah.
so let's run through the others real quick. Comptroller, Don Huffines in, Chrissy Craddock in. Does someone else get in? I think the big question here is a third candidate. Does Greg Abbott appoint a holdover once Hager's resigns and goes to be A&M chancellor? Or does he try and give someone a leg up electorally by giving them more name ID statewide by putting them in that spot? The name I've heard talked about for that is Kelly Hancock, of late especially. Other names have been mentioned in relation to this: Paul Betancourt, Joan Huffman. They all have the same problem with they can't raise money until after. Now, Hager's not resigning until June anyway, so that lines up perfectly. But what does Abbott do here? Does he want to try and prevent Don Huffines, who seems to have, at least the endorsement-wise, the momentum right now and self-funding capability?
Who ran against Abbott.
Does he want that guy to be in that spot? Because Abbott holds a grudge. He does. Absolutely he does.
It's hard not to in politics.
Right, absolutely, yeah, no question.
I don't know somebody who doesn't.
You know, especially when the personal attacks are levied in a campaign, which
for sure.
Everyone does it, right?
But also, I'd say bridges can be mended, as we've seen in the consultant world, where where there's.
I don't see the bridges being mended between Huffines
certainly,
and Abbott really in this, but
yeah.
The other notable aspect of this, I wrote a piece on this on the website. Huffines has gotten more of the elected official activist lane of endorsements. Chrissy Craddock announced her endorsement list, and the top names on it were all top donors. And all top donors to Greg Abbott. Javed Anwar, Brent Ryan, Code Campbell, various people. So they found their two lanes, but there is a third lane. And does someone fill it? Or is this just a two-horse race? I don't know. The other opening that we'll mention just very quickly, Supreme Court Justice Jeff Boyd announced he's not going to seek re-election. And so that'll open that. Another Abbott. Traditionally with that, Abbott has appointed the person that he wants to be there and run for it. It's not a holdover. He's appointing the person he wants to be the Supreme Court Justice for good there. He did that with Evan Young. I think he'll probably do the same thing here. Who that is, no idea. You can probably bet some attorney that's been a big ally to Abbott. So I haven't heard any names, but we'll see.
Great.
So there you go.
Period.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, on that note, we are going to take a short break and hear from one of our sponsors. The Beer Alliance of Texas is proud to support its members, who help deliver an annual economic impact of $35 billion and provide over 200,000 jobs to hardworking Texans. From local tax revenue to direct economic investment to charitable contributions, their members are heavily invested in the success of our communities and our state. The Beer Alliance is dedicated to ensuring the safe distribution of alcohol throughout Texas. For more information, visit beeralliance.com. And we're back.
We're back.
Okay. 3 a.m. last night.
Yeah.
We were going. Let's talk budget night. How was it?
I had fun. I had a lot of fun. Finally, we have something really happening on the House floor.
And when people talk budget night, they mean the House.
Right.
Let's be very. They do not mean the Senate.
Senate had one amendment.
Yeah.
That's nothing, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the House had 393 amendments filed.
Like herding 150 cats.
Yes. And so the question was, going into this, how are they going to expedite the process? They're not going to hear all 393 amendments. They're just not. And frankly, if they did that, based on how these members were acting, they were going to be there until 7 p.m. today, Saturday.
Which also,
Friday.
To be fair, they started acting that way, which we'll get into.
Right.
After a bunch of stuff happened and grudges start to be levied.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So they get off the supplemental calendar on Thursday. Then things stop. And they say we'll reconvene at 10:45. Well, 10:45 comes. They don't reconvene. 11:45 comes. They don't reconvene. I think like 30 minutes later.
They stood at ease.
Yeah. 30 minutes later, they finally reconvene. What was happening during that time is leadership was negotiating deals about how to, throw a huge chunk of these amendments into Article 11. Get them off the plate. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to debate it. Just get them through.
Article 11 being essentially the graveyard for a lot of these amendments. Just stick them on the back burner.
Yep. So they do that. They come up with this Article 11 list and this suspense list, something that I haven't seen before, a suspense list. Most of those, but that was just amendments they're suspending discussion on. They're just putting in the budget. Most of those were Article 11, but not all of them. There were some that were other parts of the budget. They were just like, all right, we'll throw it in. We'll hash it out in conference. We'll figure it out. We don't want to be here till 2 a.m. Well, they were here till 3 a.m.
Dinner time was what everyone was saying as far as an end time.
Bold predictions there that turned out to be not true. Now, I will say, I think initially they were on track to get out of this fairly early.
Yeah.
Maybe not dinner time, but 9 o'clock.
Absolutely.
And then things hit the fan. So, First Amendment comes, not much to it. I forget who it was, whether it was Trey Martinez Fisher or Bonin, I can't remember. Then Mary Gonzalez proposes an amendment.
A Democrat from
El Paso, who is very high ranking on the Appropriates Committee. I think
and
she's
has
vice
been
chair,
for
right?
a very long time.
She's vice chair. Has a lot of sway.
But it's been part of the appropriations process for many sessions.
Yes. So she comes up with a very nondescript amendment. You can look at it. Like it doesn't look very notable. But then she has an amendment to the amendment. And that amendment to the amendment would amend her original amendment with some significant changes. Specifically, it zeroed out the budget of the Lottery Commission the Texas Lottery, not the Lottery Commission, and the trustee offices of the governor.
Why is that important, Brad?
Because when these members are filing amendments to the budget, there's the put and take rule. If they take money from someplace, they have to put it somewhere, and vice versa. And so a lot of the places that these members take money from are those two spots, especially this session with how much the lottery is getting shellacked publicly. It was very popular among the amendments to take it from there and to put it to whatever it is you want, right?
Could be a palatable place to pull money from.
Absolutely. And the trustee offices of the governor is always that. Now, it never ends up staying in, right? This is a strategic ploy, and it was very strategic, and it was very clever. Nobody realized it. Now, when Mary Gonzalez laid out the amendment to the amendment, she said, this is just a technical correction or something like that. Did not explain what the heck it is.
I think clarifying language may have been used.
Technical was in it.
Technical
something.
Okay.
But yeah, nobody knew what the heck it was.
Which typically on the House floor, you hear that and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Members are so used to hearing that from other members.
Yep. And I think 26 or so, 25, 26 members voted against the amendment after it was amended, putting it in the budget. But nobody really knew at the time. The amendment to the amendment was just adopted without objection. It was acceptable to the author, Greg Bonin, which is important. So that comes on. Nobody thought anything of it until we get to Mitch Little's amendment to give OAG staffers a pay raise, and it was taking money to do that, I believe, from the trustee offices of the governor. Now, with the put and take rule, you have to have money to take. But because of that was tacked on, there was no money to take to apply.
Under the current budget,
Right.
as proposed,
Right.
as amended.
And like all of this is kabuki theater because they're just going to decide what the budget looks like in conference, right?
Conference committee where members of the House
Right.
and members of the Senate come together and say, hey, we have two different bills that our chambers passed. Let's come together and find the version we will put forward.
But all of this is kabuki theater, and it's designed to just get test votes on things or talking points for voters. Say they can go back to their constituents and say, hey, I voted for this. I tacked this onto the budget, even though it didn't stay on there. So that went down by point of order because there was no money, the Little Amendment. Now, much of the opposition members, the right-wingers in the caucus, many of their amendments were taking money from these places. And so basically half, three-quarters, whatever it was, of their amendments was just shot through.
Yep.
And it was a very clever maneuver. And, I think it's pretty clear leadership knew about it, particularly because Bonin it was acceptable to him, right? Now, the other side of it is that's a move to protect members from having to take bad votes that will be used against them in the primary. One member specifically.
Bad votes meaning controversial votes.
Right.
That's what we're talking
Things
about.
that primary opponents will use against them in the election. One member came up to me and said
Which
exactly
is the
that.
whole point of the members trying to offer these too, is be like, hey, let's make people take these stances.
Exactly. It's a game of chess, right? Move, counter move. And so that when they were on track to be fairly quick earlier in the day, when that happened, no shot in hell. It's over with. We're going to point of order everything. In our docket, I say pooing on the House floor. There was a lot of pooing
Point
on
of
the House
order
floor.
is, yeah.
I don't think you need to explain that for this crowd.
Maybe not.
But I hope somebody clips that pooing on the House floor up and uses it, hint, hint, 3 several days. So
Lord in heaven.
That threw everything off kilter, and it just went poof.
How'd that go?
Poof.
Yeah.
So all the right-wingers were pissed. And you know what? Like, I would be pissed too if that was my goal to put these votes up, to try and make these reforms.
Which oftentimes you'll find that the House rules or the budget or some
Yeah.
of these big discussions and debates on the House floor provide members with those opportunities to potentially get these, hot button issues on the floor and have members take votes that they
Yeah.
wouldn't otherwise, because maybe the bill won't make it to the floor. Maybe
Right.
leadership is trying to say, hey, we don't want members to have to face this vote. And other members are saying we should face these
Yeah.
votes. So these are typically the opportunities where, folks try and ferry those conversations through
Yep.
the process.
And another notable amendment from Little that was going to get a lot of attention if it came up was to pay Ken Paxton his back pay from when he was suspended for impeachment.
I was so ready for that.
That was put in Article 11 during the initial thing I mentioned by leadership. So it's not dead. It can be revived, and the Senate might push for that. It is in the budget. It's just in the section that usually gets scrapped and thrown in the trash bin. So that'll be a fight in conference committee, something to watch there. But this happened. Then the points of order started coming left and right. Briscoe Cain, who is in a bit of an ornery mood lately because of the speaker's race, like he was opposition, he lost, and now
Republican from Deer Park.
Yep, now he's rearing for a fight, and boy is he fighting. He looked way back into precedent and found a way to point of order riders, not just amendments. So when we're talking about points of order, usually in the budget stuff, it's against amendments that are proposed. No, he found a way to tank things that were already in the budget itself, or at least the committee substitute. And it worked, at least as far as I was watching. He killed 2 out of the 3 provisions that he attempted.
And then other members started doing it too.
Yep. Democrats started doing it back.
Yep.
So you have this tit for tat, and that was what prolonged this process, in addition to spending 45 minutes to write a ruling on the points of order. And a couple of reasons for that. There's only one parliamentarian right now. Hugh Brady is not on the floor doing this stuff in the moment. Also, it's just Sharon Carter. Also, these members are, especially the ones that are doing these points of order, that are the rules guys. Aaron Zwiener in the Democratic caucus, Trey Martinez Fisher, some still, but mainly it was Zwiener. On the Republican side, you have Cody Vasut, Briscoe, Cain.
And they were handing these kinds of points of order
Yeah.
to a lot of freshmen,
Yep.
getting them involved, saying, hey, let's
Well,
cut your teeth.
I saw Zwiener hand in a point of order. I don't know if it was ever called, to Rafael Anchia, and he was looking at it. That was happening with Briscoe shopping it around. Then you had something I thought that was interesting. You have on the Republican side in the opposition, Mitch Little, Brent Money. They're the guys that are being trained by, namely Briscoe, Cain. Vasut's on team leadership right now. He's a chairman, even though he's still involved in defending Republicans on the points of order. They're being trained to do that. And so it was fun watching them in real time, learning the ropes, learning what works, what doesn't. And most people don't give 2 rips. Most of the members don't give 2 rips about this parliamentary stuff, but it matters. It affects a lot of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And it is so much fun standing in the press bullpen, listening in, or just watching the body language. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite parts of this job.
I love seeing who talks to who.
Yeah.
It is fascinating. And I'm not just talking about the parliamentary stuff. It's like you'll see people up on the mics, front, back mic, Republican, Democrat, going at it against each other, making their political talking points. And then you'll see them afterwards just like elbowing each other and talking very casually on the side of the rail,
Yeah.
like nothing happened.
Oh, yeah. Zwiener and Vasut and Briscoe will afterwards be like, well, good battling with you. Oh, I didn't mention John Bryant. John Bryant does a lot of this too.
Yes.
On the Democratic side. They'll be like, hey, got you on that one. Like they're having fun with it. And it's not personal, even though they're like really pushing for their side,
Yeah.
right?
And it can be personal for sure, but oftentimes, yeah.
With them, like they know the game.
Yeah.
They know how it works. And it is a competition. It's like sports. I told another reporter on the floor, I don't really get to play sports anymore. And this is like my engagement in competition here. So that's because I'm old and decrepit.
If you were in the House, would you be a point of order guy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I could wrap my mind around it, I don't know if I could do that. But
I think you'd be just
I would
fine.
love it. That would be fun. So that was happening. You're having this long, drawn-out process to write up judge or rulings because these guys want precedent from which to base their arguments down the road when things actually matter, when you're actually debating whether a bill dies or survives. That's why they're doing this. And they're trying to feel out the parliamentarian, how she's going to rule on things. Is she more susceptible to one kind of argument versus another? That's what they're doing. And it's fun to watch it in real time playing out. So fast forward to 3 a.m., we get to the budget. You had multiple members speak against Mike Olcott. And notably, he had 3 or 4 members behind him from that flank of the Republican caucus backing him up. Then you had Brian Harrison. Nobody stood behind him. And he got up and talked about how the budget's, bloated, liberal, all the stuff he's been saying that we talked about on the podcast a lot.
Most liberal in history.
Yeah.
Which Olcott also was like, Dr. Greg Bonin, the appropriations chair who deals with the budget, ferries it through the process, certainly giving him his flowers, saying he worked very hard on this bill. But I'm still not personally supporting it, and I think taxpayers deserve A, B, and C.
Yeah, and big thing for him was not enough property tax relief.
Yes,
so
that was his talking point.
Yeah. So Harrison gets up there, nobody's behind him. Then we get to Gina Hinojosa and John Bryant. They had kind of the same theme. Democrats, they opposed it because of the ESA provision, the $1 billion going to that. Not surprised. They're on the progressive wing of their party. And, their constituents don't want this, right? Really
School
don't want
choice
this.
is not
right?
on the table for them.
So all that makes sense. Then you had Donna Howard get up, a Democrat from Austin, defend it. She said this is not perfect.
Also involved in the appropriations process.
Yep. And by the way, one of the smartest people on the finance stuff that I've ever met.
Absolutely.
It's amazing to talk to her about that stuff. The point she makes about the surplus and it's really rudimentary to just say, $24 billion surplus, when really you have all these you have unexpended balances, you have promises that weren't, things that were passed last session that weren't paid for because enabling legislation didn't pass. So she knows her way around that stuff really well and explains it very well. When Ellen Troxclair, Republican, get up and also kind of hit the same theme, only from her side of things, I wish this could be better, but this is good. This is worth voting for.
Troxclair and Howard both saying I support the budget.
Yes. And so then you had Bonin close, finally had a vote. There were 26 votes against. It's a mix of progressive Democrats and the conservative Republicans on the right flank of the party. And that was it. Other than that, you had 118 members support this. It went through pretty easily, other than, the 14 hours leading up to this.
Yeah.
There was not much question that this was going to pass. But I will say, this is more members we have vote against the budget than we've seen in a while. So that's how that ended. And we go from there. Now it goes to conference committee. They'll hash it out with the Senate.
It'll probably be a little while before we see the budget come back to the House after conference with the conference committee report. Okay, well, we have one more topic, but before we get into it, we're going to take another break and hear from a sponsor.
Do you want insights on the policies that impact your wallet? Economist and fellow Texan Vance Ginn here. Texans work hard for their money, but bad policies can take it away and risk future prosperity. On the Let People Prosper show, I break down economic news that impacts your income, job, and future in a way that you can understand. I also invite top voices in politics, policy, and economics to discuss solutions that unleash America's potential. As a former Trump White House chief economist and now policy entrepreneur at more than 20 influential organizations, I find my calling in driving forward policies that let people prosper. Get insights that can help you get ahead by subscribing to my Let People Prosper show podcast, wherever you get your podcast. For more information, go to vanceginn.com. God bless you and have a prosperous day.
And we're back. Bradley, ready to hit the final
Let's
topic
do it.
of our discussion? Okay, this seems so long ago also, like the Paxton announcement does, but earlier this week we had certainly a very notable development in the House with Representative Brian Harrison taking up or bringing forward a resolution to vacate the chair in the Texas House, essentially removing the speaker from the dais. What was it like on the floor when this was all going on?
It was...
We also knew this was coming.
We knew it was coming, yeah. Because he had filed the resolution the night before, and then the rumblings happened about, there's going to be a vote. We're going to do this. And it was kind of that was kind of Burrows calling Harrison's bluff on whether there was any movement behind actually vacating him as Speaker. And I'll talk about how they kind of maneuvered around that indirectly. But anyway, so he files this as a resolution. Of course, earlier in the week before, Burrows had told Harrison, go file a resolution on it. We're not going to do this as like a just from the back mic.
An off the cuff kind of situation.
So he does file it. They get to it. We get to what day was that? Tuesday, I think. And then you have the speeches. Harrison gets up, gives his speech, criticizing the way Burrows has been running the House, saying Democrats run the House. Then he said, this is not about Brian Harrison. This is about changing the direction of the House. To that, and to the Democrats run the House thing, you had a lot of laughter and jeers.
That got a reaction from
yeah.
folks.
I would say the mood on the floor was, solemn's not the right word, irritated. People were not having this. Ultimately the vote was very clear. There was only one person that voted with Harrison. Now, I should stop and say how it went down. So instead of actually having a vote on the resolution, there was a motion to table it. Cody Harris got up, called this a ridiculous waste of time, and then moved to table. So they have the vote on the table, record vote. There were only two that voted against. 141 to 2, I think it was. There were a handful of white lights, which 4 progressive Democrats white lighted, 1 Republican, Mike Schofield. That was interesting. So, but other than that, it was Harrison, David Lowe, and nobody else that voted against tabling this in support of vacating the chair, including all the other members who voted with reform and for David Cook for Speaker. That was kind of a halfway measure between having an actual referendum on Burrows' speakership, because they can say, we moved to table it. This is not the right time to do this. And for Burrows, from his perspective, solidifying his membership, his majority. And I think there's an argument to be made that after that, he either got really close or now has a Republican majority in the House, which he didn't have when he won the speakership. 36 Republicans joined all the Democrats, or not all the Democrats, but however many Democrats it was, to get 85 votes. And so that's a millstone that's been hung around his neck throughout this entire session that, it's a Democratic majority. I don't think that's true anymore. And you can chalk that up to members not wanting to deal with the drama, not wanting to disrupt things. I think there's a lot to be said about that, absolutely. Then you have other members who are like, well, I've come around on Burrows more.
That's the people that you're talking about here.
Yes.
In terms of getting into that majority. It's not the people who are like, now's not the time,
right.
Annoyed with it, maybe annoyed with the speaker still, but not fully in support of his leadership. There are other members, though, that would probably have switched that side, and that's who you're talking about.
Well, mostly. I think you can also add the people who are like, some of them who are saying it's not, this is a waste of time, let's not do this right now.
The jury's still out.
Yeah, I think there are different flavors of all of this,
yes.
right? There are members who are very much against Burrows as Speaker, who voted to table this because, in their mind, and Tony Tinderholt said this is theater. This was, and he said this, it's not my words, it's his, this was Brian Harrison doing something about himself. This was his effort to try and make a big spectacle to raise his profile more. And
that criticism is coming from inside the House, right? Like that is
inside the House.
Somebody that is typically politically aligned, but it's a very different
Yeah.
session at this
But
point.
not just inside the House. Abraham George current Texas GOP chair, had a subtweet. He didn't say it explicitly as Tinderholt did, but it was along the same lines. It was, "This is dumb. Stop this." There are ways. He said, "Strategy matters. The way you do things, actions matter. The way you do things matter." And that's kind of the case of these members like Tony Tinderholt and Mitch Little, Luther, all these people who are very much against Burrows as Speaker. They don't want him to be Speaker. But they're trying to mount a coordinated opposition in strategic ways, like what they did on the budget stuff, right? And they saw Tinderholt, or what Harrison did, as just political theater and nothing more. One member came up to me in that sect of the caucus and said, this is basically the Leroy Jenkins meme.
We don't take them down quick. I think it's a pretty good plan. We should be able to pull it off this time. What do you think, Abdul? Can you give me a number crunch real quick?
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating, of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, that's a lot better than we usually do. All
right, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
The clip is just played, and that is the comparison that they're making. They see this as him going out on his own just for his own desires and purposes.
And talking to members. Okay, so when I said for the call coming from inside the House, that was a turn of phrase, not the Texas House. So
Okay,
coming
sorry.
from inside of that group, right?
Right.
Inside of that group of reformers, of folks who've been critical of the Speaker, that right flank of the caucus. Those are the people I'm talking
Right.
about. So if you are receiving criticism from inside of your own house, that's what I'm talking about, and that's what we're talking about when it comes to Tinderholt and other members who are saying, "Hey, I don't like how this is being done." Now, I've also heard from members in that group that they're saying we weren't approached about
Yeah.
this. So, we weren't even part of the conversation about this. We did not know it was being brought up. This was very much a rogue move by Harrison, which is part of the criticism.
Yes.
Saying, at least loop us and let's have a discussion about this.
Yeah.
If we're all teammates, political teammates on this, let's actually act like it.
He basically just said, "I filed the resolution. Go join it. Otherwise, tough luck," right?
Right.
The argument you just said was literally a statement put in the Journal by Daniel Alders, Shelley Luther, and Katrina Pearson. Carissa Richardson also put out her own thing. So that was the criticism from there, and everyone knew it was going to fail. Everyone did. This had no shot. And, you look online, and Harrison has a following, and people that they want Burrows out at all costs. People who are not in the House. Their vote on this, they can have their say, but they're not the ones voting on this, right?
And there's still a lot of grudges held from how the Speaker's race
Absolutely.
went down,
Yep.
right? Saying, hey,
Yep.
what about the caucus vote? What about
Yep.
this? What about that? And that is all still very deep-seated resentment within Republican Party activist
Yeah.
circles. So
Yep.
there is a crowd that is supportive of these measures, absolutely, in
Yeah.
this move by Harrison.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, though, to watch the inner dynamics of the House, where you have members who are aligned on these kinds of issues being like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah. There's also trepidation and criticism about what's not passed yet, right? And is the House moving slow? David Lowe, who was the only one that signed on to Harrison, voted with him, he put out a statement that was kind of a half-hearted, vote of support with Harrison. He's like, basically, I don't like the way the House is going. I don't think Burrows should be Speaker. And so that's why I voted with Harrison on this. But I'm not interested in doing this again unless there's 76 votes to remove the Speaker. So even there, the one person that was with him is a half-hearted vote of support with him.
Like, hey, yeah, in theory, this is where I'm at, but
Right.
let's make sure we're organized next time.
Because why take the swing if you know you're going to miss? That's basically it. The old saying, "Come with the king, you best not miss," right? And so you had this happen. From what I understand, there was kind of a olive branch offering to all the reform members, even the ones who are still very much anti-Burrows. You vote against this, and all is forgiven. Now, that's not
We
going to say
move
that.
forward.
That's not going to say they're not going to fight. They're going to fight, right? But we're going to bury the hatchet, basically. And I think, if that happens, and if you have more of those members on the right flank of the party there in leadership affecting decision making, you could actually have more of a Republican majority governing this than we saw at the beginning. Maybe not. Who knows? There's so much left to play here, and all the action in session remains, right? Bills dying, bills passing, all this stuff. So, I think that also the case that people like Abraham George are making is there's going to be a lot of time for a postmortem after this to see.
Like, we haven't passed the budget yet.
Right.
So we haven't even had school choice. Like, there are a lot of
Yeah.
discussions about we haven't touched these issues that folks are already criticizing
Yeah.
the borough's speakership and leadership over. Well, let's get to those, see how that all turns out, and then let's have a conversation.
And I think you can insinuate based on comments by Dan Patrick, Burroughs knows that he's going to be judged on what passes and what fails, and he's going to have to get things across the line. Otherwise, he's going to be in the same spot that Dade Phelan was. Now, from what I'm hearing, he's managing things a lot better than Phelan did in the chamber on these kinds of things.
Which also,
First and foremost,
oh, go ahead.
he doesn't have Dan Patrick at his throat yet, or maybe not at all. We'll see. Patrick is increasing his trepidation about the way things are going in the House. Like, I'm still optimistic, but they're going to have to get their act together and pass stuff, right? Otherwise, we're going to be here for specials, and then he's going to go, balls to the walls against the speaker like he has done the last couple sessions. So,
Which the criticisms here could be, from that side, from the Harrison
Yeah.
sect of the party, could be, okay, well, we moved slowly on A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Like, that's where, but the other folks saying we haven't had these policy debates yet are also correct in saying
Right.
we have no way to tell what
Yeah.
will be passed.
I think the way this played out went about as well for Burroughs and leadership as it possibly could have. Maybe the only thing you could have gotten more is David Lowe not voting with Harrison, so that Harrison's literally the only person. But David Lowe's statement says now, like, Harrison's on his own. David Lowe's not in his camp on this. And I think you saw when I mentioned earlier the statements on the budget, David Lowe was not standing behind Harrison. He was standing behind Mike Olcott. Those things are subtle, but there's a reason they do this, right? And, during the budget debate, Tony Tinderholt's going around whipping votes constantly. Guess who wasn't talking to anybody? Harrison. He was talking on his phone constantly. I don't know who he's talking to. He's probably talking strategy.
No idea.
But it was noticeable how much he was on the phone, not talking to his colleagues, talking to somebody. Also filming videos of himself criticizing the way the budget's going. So he's very much a lone wolf right now. And, he has unified the House by doing this in a way that wasn't going to happen before. Now, there's still fights to be had.
As we saw yesterday.
People like Mitch Little are not behind Burroughs as Speaker, other than just let's not introduce this chaos into the House of having to pick a new Speaker. Because also, keep in mind, if they remove Burroughs, they then have to have a Speaker's race right there. Who the hell do they pick on this, right? That's just, I would love to see that happen just from the
Sheer spectacle of it all.
Yes, from the entertainment. But yeah, so I think Burroughs is very happy with how that went, and we'll see what the opposition does, how they regroup. But when you have people being people on the internet, Twitter, the Twitterati, calling Tony Tinderholt a rhino, I think you've kind of jumped the shark, and that is quite the situation we're in, and I don't know. Yeah.
It's a wild time to be watching this particular flank of the party interact with each other, and I think two roads can only diverge for so long before there's a big break. And what will that look like?
Yeah.
Be very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a jam-packed episode.
Jam-packed for sure. Bradley, thank you.
well done.
Are you going to be sleeping as much as possible this weekend, or are you going to be watching the Masters?
I will be watching the Masters.
Yeah.
And doing my worst Masters impression by playing golf on Saturday and probably sucking, but it is what it is.
Well, I've heard you're not that bad of a golfer.
I am not that bad, no. No, there are worse, including my buddies that I play with. We'll see if they listen to this.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't.
I doubt it.
Any other final thoughts?
No, a couple months left of session, and now we're in the home stretch and where everything's going to happen. So I look forward to the deadline calendars. I look forward to Sine Die. And thanks everyone for following along. Hope you enjoy these episodes
Absolutely.
as much as we enjoy making them.
They're a blast. Well, folks, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
All right, chums,
ready, guys?
let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!